As I've mentioned previously, a big turning point for me in my life and life of faith was this retreat called Teens Encounter Christ. And after that first one I made, I worked on a whole bunch more as a team member, many as a priest, and then I just did a bunch of them. So anyway, at one point on that first evening after reconciliation, they would always go up to the upper basilica there in Cary, and we would do a renewal of baptism. So part of that was the priest would bless each person with holy water and say, in baptism, you died with Christ, you are now living his life. After all those texts, I think I heard that hundreds of times. In baptism, you died with Christ, you are now living his life. Maybe that's why it sticks with me. And I thought of that with our gospel today, because Jesus is telling us that we're all just caught up in the whole life of God, who Jesus is starting to reveal as a trinity of persons, as a communion. And we have a new relationship with this communion, a communion of God just dwelling within us and us dwelling in God. We are now living his life. What does that mean? Jesus tells his disciples that part of that means we're following his commandments. But his commandments, of course, can be summed up in his great commandment to love God with all of our mind, heart, soul, and strength, and our neighbor as ourselves. So too, I think it starts what we heard in our second reading, where St. Peter says that we should sanctify Christ as Lord in our hearts. Sanctify Christ as Lord in our hearts. To make him the center of everything as he's meant to be, the one that gives us direction and meaning and purpose, who is the center of it all. But not only is there like an interior part of living his life, there's a going out as well. There's a special mission that you and I have as part of living the life in Christ and the newness that is. We hear about that in our readings today as well. We hear about the deacon Philip going to proclaim Christ to Samaria, and we hear St. Peter tell us that we should always be ready to give an explanation for the reason for our hope. Why does our faith matter to us? What has God done in our life? What difference does it make? It's not about like some kind of heavy-handed proselytizing. He even says do it with gentleness and reverence. Just being willing to share with others just our own relationship with God. How do we make that come to bear at home, at work, in our other spheres of influence? Offering to pray with people. And so we have this inner movement of living life in Christ. We have this exterior movement of living his life and going out and bringing his life and love and salvation to bear to a world that is just too insistent on having an orphan heart and having an orphan spirit. God has more in store for each and every person, and he relies on us to help make that good news known. As we encounter Christ here in the Mass today, and then are sent forth to go and to share him with others, let us indeed know that we are living his life. With the grace of God, help us to live that more and more.